everybody, welcome to Jacob's Quest, and last night I saw Pixar's new movie, Elemental, and I gotta say up front, this was a delightful movie. I can't think of any other way to put that. It just made me feel good to watch it, you know what I mean? This is not like Pixar's greatest movie. I don't even know if this will be considered like the next big hit necessarily, but I will say, considering all the movies that I've watched and all the drama and all the superhero movies and all the just watching something that was just happy and just like your love story and your immigrant story and I don't know, it was just nice to watch, you know what I mean? So I don't know how else to really put that, but it was just nice to watch. So yeah, let's go ahead and just get into it. The first thing is that, based off the trailers, you kind of walk into this and you know that it's gonna kind of touch on some, issues as to like cultures colliding and maybe a little bit of a romance story going on. But what I didn't quite know was how much of a second generation immigrant story that this really was, because right away you have the parents the parents of the main fire girl. I don't remember what they call their species, but the fire people. Their parents come in and they're speaking a different language. They show up at the docks of this city, and it's very much like, okay, so this is your what is it, Ellis Island, New York story, where like they don't speak the local language, and they don't feel like they fit in necessarily because the society, in a very literal way, is built for water people. And they say that, so like, okay, this city was not built for fire people, it was built for water people, so like you'd see some very clear real world parallels going on there. And then they show how like they built this little shop that has fire people food and fire people products and stuff that fire people would want to buy, not necessarily anyone else, right? And so you see how like they slowly start building this community, more and more fire people move into the area. And just like how New York City has was it Chinatown and Little Italy and stuff like that, like you have like these little centers of like, this is a group of immigrants, several generations of immigrants at this point, that have lived in this like tight-knit community where they sell their food and they sell stuff that's from their country, right? Because that's what they know. So you see like that kind of thing form, but then you see a little bit of a darker thing come in where a couple of the water people come into the fire person's shop, and they're like teenagers, they're like messing around, they're touching stuff, and the owner's like, water people, right? So you see kind of the darker side of like, like you see some like racial type stuff happening in this movie as well, right? So I felt like this movie did a good job of like kind of touching on a lot of stuff, and some of it is kind of similar to what we saw in Zootopia, although I think Zootopia was more of like a systemic justice system type thing, whereas this is more of like, hey, how can these cultures mingle together, so like it's similar, but it's more of a personal level, because we also see how the fire girl has dreams of her own and she wants to go do other things, but she feels obligated to stay here and inherit this store that was her dad's dream, right? And so it's a story about that, about her like not wanting to upset her immigrant father who sacrificed so much. So you see like all of this stuff is really going to play on this is really going to touch a lot of people out there who really do live these stories, but then you also sort of have this Romeo and Juliet type story, kind of, where it's like the water person and the fire person, they slowly start forming this bond and they get closer and closer, and then they fall in love, and they so like it is like your traditional love story, but their people are at odds. And there's even smaller moments where like the fire girl visits the water people's family, and one of like his uncle or something, like, oh, you're so well spoken, you speak so well. She's like, yeah, I've been speaking the same language my whole life, so like you see like moments like that where you're like, oh, oh no. Just people who, what's the name for that, backhanded compliments, or even unintentional prejudices, like just saying like, oh, you're so well spoken. It's like you assume she wouldn't be, so like stuff like that happens in this movie, and it's just, but they do it in such a nice way where they don't like, they don't over dramatize those points. You know, they let those moments play out, and they kind of like, yeah, huh, and then they just move on, because the Water family, they are nice people, but like, you know, they have like those awkward moments. And then the dad, you know, although he has to kind of learn to get over his kind of prejudices because of the struggle that he went through when he first moved here. You know, he had like this prejudice against the Water people because the city wasn't built for him, you know. So of course they have to learn to get over that, and that's really the main obstacle of this movie. You know, you do have like this whole thing where the pipes in the store are bursting, and the store got threatened to close down, so they have to, you know, they make friends with the city person. I don't remember what her actual job status is. The person who would shut down businesses that are not up to code. That person, whatever the name of that position is. Anyways, they have to make friends with her, and you know, they go to like this sporting events with all the Cloud people, and they talk about how like, well, the Cloud, you know, it's just a dumb sporting event to you, but to me, I went to these games with my father, you know. So like, it's everyone in this movie, they all have like these misunderstandings with each other's cultures, where you see like the conflict would arise, but then they move past that and they gain like an understanding, right? So, you know, yes, you've seen a lot of movies do this, but I think this one did it in a much better way. You know, nothing, like I said, nothing was over dramatized. This is not a drama movie. It has like those awkward moments and those like, oh, I see what they're doing here, but I feel like they kept everything relatively lighthearted, and it's such a colorful movie, and the way they let the world work, the way that the Water people flow through the city, and the way the trains work, and just everything that these elemental people are able to do, because like, oh, that's right, they don't, you know, not all of them necessarily have physical forms, you know, like one of them kind of evaporates, or if you accidentally get extinguished, you have to like eat a little piece of charcoal or something to come back, you know. So it's definitely just you know, what Pixar does best, I think, world building, and just the creativity in the fact that you have these characters that are not necessarily human. So what can you put them through? What can they do? You know, what abilities do they have? And just, yeah, overall, just I had a great time watching this. You know, like I said, I don't know if it's necessarily gonna be, you know, like everyone fell in love with Inside Out, or, you know, I don't know if it's necessarily gonna be the next one of those, you know. And obviously Pixar's been having kind of a rough go, because during the pandemic and the release of Disney Plus, a lot of these movies came just straight to streaming. And so, you know, there's been a lot of talk recently about how audiences have been trained to expect these to just be on streaming now, right? So it's like, it's hard to like reverse that and tell people like, no, you have to go to the theater to watch a movie and then it'll be on streaming, because, you know, that's the case. Is like, you kind of taught people to just wait for Disney Plus. Like I've you know, not this movie necessarily, but I've had conversations with people saying like, are you gonna watch this? And like, no, I'm just gonna wait for streaming. And you can't blame them, because the movies are expensive. Movie theaters are expensive. Everything's expensive right now. So, you know what I mean? It's like, it is one of those weird situations that Pixar specifically finds itself in, where, you know, like, unfortunately, a lot of people might not experience this movie for several months until it's on Disney Plus, and then they'll watch it. But in any case, I do hope that this movie gets, you know, I hope it gets watched by a lot of people, because I know they've had that struggle. You know, they came out with Lightyear, which honestly, this is a much better movie than Lightyear was. I'll say that right now, you know. But yeah, just overall, I just enjoyed watching this. You know, of course, it's a nice kids film. You know, it's colorful. They, you know, they have a lot of jokes. Although there were a couple of moments where they, you know, not like Shrek levels of adult humor or anything, not like those kinds of innuendos, but there was like, towards the end, the fire lady's getting on a boat and her parents are like kind of joking. They're like, all right, now that you're out of the house, more time for hanky panky. And everyone in the theater was like, whoa, wait, what did he just say? So, you know, it's jokes like that where it's like, okay, so the parents are going to be able to have sex more now that the kids are out of the house. You know, okay. So, you know, there are some little jokes like that. But yeah, just overall, this was a delightful movie to watch. It was colorful and it was very inventive, and I think it told a really nice story about like cultures and immigrant struggle, and people like not wanting to disappoint their parents, and then, you know, like stuff like that. I will say the water guy, he mentioned a couple times here about how like, oh, his father had died at some point, and he, you know, he regrets not having said some things. And I will say that that is one thing that does not necessarily get as explored. He's definitely he's the love interest, he's the secondary character, so I do kind of wish that we could explore the water person's like life more, because like there's stuff happening there, but you know, overall he seems to have like a good family. So I get why we focused on the fire girl, right? Because there's plenty of drama to happen there, with the shop being shut down and her parents and all that stuff, right? But in any case, yeah, just overall delightful movie. Go ahead and watch it. You know, I kind of want Pixar movies to become these, you know, when I was growing up, Pixar movies were like these big event films. Like people would hear there's a Pixar movie coming out and everyone would go and watch that thing, you know? So I kind of want Pixar to get back to that point, and this was a really good movie. So, you know, hopefully a lot of people go out and support it, you know, and don't just wait for Disney Plus. But if you do, you know, again, everything in the world is expensive right now. Economy not so great, so I get it. You know, I can't blame you if you're like, I can't spend money on a movie ticket. So I get it, but hopefully, you know, Pixar starts to get there again. But this was just a really nice one. So yeah, there you go. There's Elemental, and yeah, if you have the chance, go ahead and check it out. I think you'll just have a nice time. It's just, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you want to go to a movie and just feel nice. You know what I mean? And that's what this is. You know, you don't feel too. You know, I know some people are going to get some emotional parts in this, but I think overall it's just a nice movie. All right, bye.